Hey everyone, welcome to the Executive Edge podcast. I'm Jemai Canley, founder of Potential Unleashed Consulting. I sit down with founders, executives, and high performers to unpack what really gives leaders their executive edge. In a world where everyone has access to the same tools and information, what actually separates the exceptional from the average? Welcome everyone to today's episode. I'm very excited to be with our guest today. I am with Amir Durrani, Senior Vice President of People and Culture at Norms Restaurant. Amir, thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. Pleasure to be here.
I'm so happy. As I mentioned to you previously, I'm so excited and so excited for today's session, just in reading about you and learning about your background and just really the way that you approach leadership. As I mentioned, the whole purpose of this podcast is really to provide one, to share information with other leaders, to provide insights, and to create community. As you and I mentioned, or as I was mentioning in our conversation earlier, leadership often can be a very lonely place for people. And so I'm so excited just from some of the jewels and insights that you've already dropped to really get that out to the people. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you again, and I appreciate the invite. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Amir, if it's okay with you, are you ready to jump in?
Yes, let's go.
All right, well, thank you. So I like to start with, tell us a little bit about your organization and about your position. So Senior Vice President of People and Culture at Norms Restaurants. Tell us more about that.
Okay, great. Norm's Restaurant is a very iconic chain founded back in 1949. And we are in business through all of these years by doing one thing, and that is by delivering an experience that really brings the whole dining out and eating process into one fold. And we do it through a large group of team members that all share that common goal. And of course, our food is just delicious. Our prices are very uh, friendly. We offer immense value, and we do it in a way that's fast, quick, convenient, and something that really kind of resonates with the communities that we serve.
Thank you. And I know you mentioned a pretty large team. About how many people, just to give context for the folks who are listening?
We have about 1,400 employees throughout Southern California, and we have one location in Las Vegas.
I did not realize I'm going to Las Vegas next month. So that is good to know.
Please
All
stop
right.
by. Please
All
stop by.
right.
We'd love to have you.
I definitely will. I definitely will. Well, thank you. So again, 1,400 people, because sometimes I think when people hear or think restaurant, they might think 20 people, 100 people, 500 people would be pretty large, right? But you're dealing with over 1,400 people across multiple locations. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah, so if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit more about your position of Senior Vice President of People and Culture. And I love the combination of those two things, but tell us a little bit more about how that came to be.
Well, this is, of course, a new name for human resources, and it's an important role that's in every organization, but it has carries a huge responsibility because it's important that persons in my seat realize that not only is this just a role or job function where we are involved with so many different facets of the job, but we're also influencing others to do well and to succeed. We have one shared common vision, of course, which is giving great good service. But internally, we want to help each other grow and we want to help each other succeed. And that's what I think one of the big part of our department or my job is to really begin with the employee experience. Really do things that make the employee want to be part of our team and want to grow with our team. We are also really focused on compliance. Of course, in California, that's an important piece,
Yes.
ensuring that all the laws are followed and everything is done properly and correctly. And then we're also looking at just on the employee's well-being piece, which involves the benefits, the insurance piece, making sure they are well compensated, and so on. So those are really the important parts there. Once in a while, there's a conversation that needs to be had with two individuals that just need to kind of come together. So there's a little bit of that conflict resolution too. So there's so many different things that go into people and culture, and all of these things fall under the umbrella of culture, which is probably the most important driving force in any company. And when you have a strong culture, then everybody that works there, their jobs are easier because we kind of know what everybody's doing there. We know we don't have to ask everybody specifically. We know what their purpose is and what their mission is, and it's almost like this inherent shared view that everybody just kind of helps each other, they support each other, and together we go out and, like I said, deliver that guest experience.
Yeah, I love it. And, that's one of the things that I really found interesting about your title, which again is representative of that department, because we are seeing this movement away from the term human resources. But in a lot of organizations, honestly, Amir, what I'm seeing is that now becomes just people or people development or people resources or something of that nature. So when I saw the combination of people and culture, I thought this is going to be a really great conversation because, as you just mentioned, culture is such an important driving force inside of any organization. And so, just as a follow up to that, I'm curious because I think when people think about specifically the hospitality industry, I think a lot of times that idea promotes people to think about external focus, right? The hospitality is about what you deliver to the consumer, to the customer, right? To the client. And what I've heard in that piece with you is the importance of balance, that you provide an amazing experience for people who come to the restaurants. And what I just heard you say was also about taking care of the employee. Could you talk a little bit more about that balance and why you feel that's so important? Because again, I've talked to some people who have told me that they feel like their HR department is solely there to just protect the organization, that is not there for them as a person. But again, in reading up about you and just hearing some of your experiences, I thought, wow, this is going to be such a wonderful conversation because again, you have this approach to balance both, yes, the organization, the customer, and the internal customer, which is that employee. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jamad. Well, first of all, it is not easy. There are certainly a lot of parts, moving parts to this. Um, I think the important thing to first begin with is that the teams that are in the restaurant, the operation side, they are the frontline employees. They are the ones that are greeting the guest at the door. They're the ones that are making hospitality happen. And they're the architects of that experience. In order for them to do their jobs happily, efficiently, um, uh, they need to be happy themselves. They need to be content about working in the organization. And I think that's where our role and people and culture, that's where we provide the greatest benefit and the greatest push to them. Is that, first of all, we begin with the common shared values that we all have, whether it's an employee at the restaurant, whether it is somebody at the support center. We have a common goal. And that common goal, of course, is besides the vision that we have as a company, is, of course, like we said, taking care of the guest, the dining experience. So if an employee understands those, that's number one. They understand the objectives and the goals. But that feeling inside about wanting to come to work and being happy, and then leaving work even more happy because now you've made a lot of money if you were a server, or you've left with the sense of feeling like I've done something today, I've accomplished something today. All of those things occur when the individual receives a feeling of being valued in an organization. And it's not just words. It has to be manifested in certain things that we do, such as appreciation. We do lots of employee appreciation events, recognition. A lot of things that we do are really kind of revolving around what makes the employee happy and what is in the best interest of the employee. Now, you mentioned other dynamics there, like you have the guest, you have the ownership, and you have the employee. that three-part troika is something that needs to be the three balls that we're always juggling up in the air, is to make sure none of those drop. And we do it in a way where people, again, feel a sense of team, and they know that there is a department out there that they can always look to for support and for guidance. And what I said about leadership, influence. If there's that common theme going back and forth between the employee in the restaurant and people in culture, then we know we're doing our job.
Yeah.
And the best litmus test are the numbers. The numbers for any organization, I think, tell a story that could be much more factual than a person's opinion.
Hmm.
And at a company like Norms, we have been very proud to have one of the lowest turnovers in the industry. We received awards for that on a national level. We've also had the highest tenure of employees. So when you put that next to the industry average, it becomes very clear why would somebody want to be an employee of Norms, and why would they want to come and grow with us. More than half of our management teams, if not maybe close to three-quarters, have started at the hourly level and
Wow.
have progressed up. In almost every restaurant, we have legacy employees where it's a second or third generation employee working because the dad started there or the grandfather started there. So these things, again, don't just happen because we say it or we want it, but it happens because there is that feeling of teamwork, that synergy, and people working together to under that same common goal.
Yeah. Wow. So you just in that, and I know there's other things that I want to get to, but I'm just going to be honest. Just in that, Amir, you hit on several things that really are causing me to think. One, I love. I mentioned the word customers, and I heard you intentionally use the word guests, and I think that speaks so highly to the culture that you all are building because words are very important. And words, we teach this in our work that words create pictures and pictures create feelings and emotions. And the word guests, just being someone who would come to the restaurant, that has a different feeling for me. That has a different expectation of how I would be treated as a guest rather than just a customer or just a consumer. So one, I just want to thank you for that because it definitely was like light bulb, like ding, and I'll say this too. Being in this work now for over 20 years around culture, I've also seen buzzwords. But one of the things about you, Amir, in this conversation, I've also been really great at picking up on who's just using the word and who actually embodies it. So I say that to say for the listeners as well, as I heard Amir use the word guest, that wasn't just a buzzword. Again, I'm hearing it backed up with the practices. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank
But
you.
then you said something that I don't know that I've ever heard before. And it was shocking to me in thinking about my career in culture transformation, leadership development, working with so many different organizations. I'm not sure that I've ever heard this before, Amir. And you said the employee coming to work happy and leaving happier. And I don't know that I've ever actually heard that articulated before. And so I've heard a lot about we want, our employees to be happy or we want them to come to work happy, right? Because we know if they come to work happy, that's going to lead to a better experience and everything else for those who they're working with and serving. But I've not heard, I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about the employee leaving work happier. Right? That to me says a lot about culture. So there's some other questions I want to get to, but I made a little note because I will, if we have time, I would love to come back to that
Sure,
as well. Because
sure.
that's just, again, for people who are listening to that, what a vision, what a goal to have your staff, to have your employees leave work happier, come to work happy, and to leave happier. Yeah. All right. Amir, how did you personally get into leadership? Leadership is one of those things that people can come to by so many different paths. Some people just kind of naturally fall into it. Some people, they're kind of coached and mentored into it, even if that's not their desire. People see something in them and help cultivate that. Other people, honestly, have chosen leadership because of the financial payoff of leadership and all those things. What brought you to leadership, and why dedicate your career to leading?
Well, I think you said it very well, Jamad. Leadership isn't something that you can necessarily just pick up a book and say, I know it, I learned it, and I'm going to go do it. It has different parts to it. Uh, my personal side to it, I think leadership is something that you grow into and you acquire over shared experiences throughout your life. And I've been around, and I'm sure you have too, around people that are very good leaders, and they started off their journey by not wanting to be in leadership.
Yes.
And sometimes they emerge as more effective. Then I've also worked around people that were just very, very eager to be leaders and didn't really live up to the role. So I think there has to be a balance there, that you certainly want to be able to accept the responsibility and know that if there's nobody behind you following you, then what kind of leader are you? And so leadership isn't just a title necessarily. It is certainly something that comes with immense responsibility. It's something you deliver through your actions, and you do it in a way that you influence people, you inspire people, you guide people, and you motivate people. Those are things that are not very easy to do. And I think if anybody says, "Oh yeah, I do all of them," they're probably not being very truthful about that, because these things carry a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of devotion. But it is doable. There are
Yes.
great, great leaders out there, but we could spend probably an entire show on listing out all the great leaders out there. But then there's also people that are probably very good at what they do, probably haven't really mastered that whole part of leadership just yet. Doesn't mean they won't one day, but there needs to be a pathway if a person aspires to grow and wants to be in a position of responsibility where they are managing a group of people and guiding them through shared values. Then it is really up to someone, perhaps people in culture, to create that setting, to create that stage. And we talk about leadership in our organization. We talked about the John Wooden principles of leadership, and we just had a conference last week where we got everybody together and we had different breakouts and we talked about leadership there, because we know it is something that's critical, it's vital. But it's important not to forget that leadership isn't about just doing tasks and being transactional. Leadership is really something that has to be a delivery, and it has to be done over time. I'm not sure there is even an end point to leadership, that you do it, you're there, you're done, like a finish line on a race. Leadership is just a constant growth, constant acquiring of knowledge and experiences, and helping others.
Yeah. Wow. So well said. And I love something that you touched on there as well, and that is, just because someone is really good at a specific task or job does not mean that they're going to be great at leadership yet. And again, they can grow into it, it can be developed. But I think sometimes people are promoted simply because they're really good at a specific area in the job. And then they're just expected to be a great leader. And if we look at professional sports, for example, you can find some of the most highly celebrated and effective players do not always translate into being great coaches, because it's a different skill set. It's like I can go out and do this thing really, really well, but the things that you just mentioned about leadership, about common values and communicating with people and developing people and all of those things, I think that's just a great point, Amir. So I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Well, another question that I would love to dive into, and I think again listeners would be very interested in this, is in leadership today. Let me rephrase that. In leadership in general, there's often headwinds that are coming our way in leadership, look different all the times, but there's normally always some form of headwind. And I'm curious, just in your experience of being in leadership and doing this type of work for years, when you're facing headwinds, what are some of the things that you think are important for leaders to really focus on? And the reason why I'm not wanting to get specific into maybe a today headwind at the moment is because I find that the headwind may change, but the principles that we can use when we're facing headwinds often can be useful in multiple environments. So if you want to talk about a specific headwind, definitely open to that. But the reason why I opened it up to just talk a little bit more about just when the leaders are facing headwinds in general, what are some things that you have found helpful to really focus on is so it can be applied to multiple places.
Okay. Um, you know, everybody makes decisions throughout their life. Some are good, some are bad, some are in between. One thing that I think few people do is they reflect on those decisions and the outcomes. I think the important headwind that often comes across with leadership is the inability to influence people and to get them to really kind of be guided in a certain way. Um, those headwinds are, there's some reasons behind it. Of course, some may be generational attitude differences. One group of generation may view a particular approach different than somebody that was senior to them. So there's misalignment there. And that could be a headwind. The other headwind could be the circumstances in which you're trying to operate. Maybe you don't have as much time. Maybe you don't have as much resources. Maybe you don't have as many people. So it could be a variety of those things that could be headwinds. But the single thing that, if I look at myself and how I've continued to grow and I keep growing, is reflection on the past. If one had to list out all the decisions they made throughout their lifetime, I think it would run into thousands of pages of a book. So it's that there's great knowledge right there for you to go back and look at and see, hey, if I had a chance to redo something, would I do it differently or would I do it the same way? And more importantly, what did I learn from it? Did I truly learn and can I grow from it further? Or was it just, something I did and I moved on? I think the more you reflect on yourself, that's how you enable yourself to deal with those headwinds that come your way. If you just simply turn to resources that are there at the present, real time, you may not always get every answer in the proper context. Certain things you have to sort of look back in time. And when you do, again, you go back and say, this is what I did then, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
that approach can work today. And that would be your remedy to those headwinds. But those headwinds are going to be there, right? Those headwinds, there's tailwinds and headwinds. And those headwinds will be there in every organization, in every role, in every industry, no matter where you go.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Amir. So I know I said that we weren't going to get into specific topics, but you hit one that I'm sure the listeners, the community would love to just hear any insights that you might have. And it's one that I hear often, and that is right now we are dealing with more generations in the workforce at the same time than we ever historically have. Just any advice that you have to a leader on how to not only navigate that, because I think when I use the word navigate, it can say like, just kind of like, how do we get through it? But so not just navigate, but how any advice you can give to a leader on how to navigate that, but also how to deal with that in an effective way that still continues to promote good culture.
Jabad, you made a very good point about the generation that's in the workforce today. I think over 65% of the workforce in the US is now millennials. And this group of people grew up in the era of the internet and the computers compared to their counterparts who grew up and grew in their roles professionally before even one or two computers even came about. So there's certainly a huge gap that exists. I think the best way to address that is look at your workforce, the younger folks that are out there, and understand that they bring immense value based on where they have been and the context in which they're growing, and bridge that gap with them. It doesn't mean starting tomorrow you have to act like them and dress like them. It just means that you have to be able to really bring yourself and them together. Don't have an ego. Something that I often despise is egos in people, because those egos really become barriers to learning and to growing. So remove that, just throw that out the window. And if there is someone in your workforce that you feel disconnected from or you feel a distance from, be the first one to approach them. Go near them. Go talk to them, and understand their view about what you are doing. And I'm sure of it because I've done it. I can say this from personal experience. You find something common to agree on. And that, I think, is the first step in that journey that sort of brings the two sides together. And when you have that type of synergy occurring between a workforce that was born after 2000 or the late 1990s to a generation that was born in the 60s and 70s, then you start to notice and focus more on what they have in common versus what they have different. And when you focus on what's common, then you certainly are doing something that's healthier for the organization, and you're building that organization. Again, when we list out our differences and we list out the things we share, hopefully the list of what we share is going to be greater than our differences.
Yeah.
But it takes effort to look at what we share with one another, when it's easier just to kind of criticize and find faults in people.
Yeah. Thank you. Again, great insights. Great, not only insight, but advice that people can really lean into. So I have two more questions, Amir, if that's okay.
Please, please.
All right. I'm going to give you both right now, but we'll come back and do one and then the second. First, just based off of what you just mentioned, it created this question in my head of what role do you think vulnerability plays in leadership? Because as I heard you talking about the ego, and I think that that's so important, like you said, to put the ego aside. So, I would love for you, if you wouldn't mind, just giving your thoughts and opinions on what role does vulnerability and transparency play in leadership? And I'll leave it loose. I just have found that some leaders hear vulnerability and that triggers negative thoughts or feelings because they have this picture of what vulnerability looks like. And I have a feeling that you might have a different idea on vulnerability. And then the second question that we'll close out on is, if I'm a new leader, either new to leadership or new to a team, new to an organization, and I want to build culture, because either I'm trying to build it from the start, or maybe I've inherited a culture, whatever it may be. What advice would you give to that leader on how to really begin to establish positive, constructive culture? So those are the two questions. First one on vulnerability and transparency. What role do you think that plays in leadership? And then the second one that we'll end on is around what might be some steps that you would give to a leader who is new to a certain culture and wants to build or grow into a more constructive culture. So let's start with the vulnerability question.
Okay. All right. Vulnerability, I think, exists everywhere. It exists in all of us, but you have to be able to manage it. You have to be able to manage it in such a way that it doesn't derail your efforts and it doesn't turn into insecurity or weakness. Vulnerability can come in different shapes and sizes. It can come through, just use examples, a person's own experience. It could come through age. It could come through, sometimes through gender. It could come sometimes through backgrounds, or you name it. It could be any reason whatsoever. But it's all about how do you manage that. Lots of individuals recognize the weaknesses they have within them. Some exploit them. Some play victim. But many try to use those as a way to become stronger and as a way to learn from them and as a way to grow from them. And if you are able to manage those vulnerabilities in any scenario, I think you are effectively putting yourself up to face almost any adversary out there. But if you succumb to those vulnerabilities and certainly feel like you've lost and you've been defeated, then that mindset will follow you everywhere in every decision. So it's important to, of course, have your information correct, accurate, ready to go. It's important to know the subject that you're either discussing or dealing with or delivering on. And when you're set up for success, then those vulnerabilities, while they exist in the background, will not get the best of you or the other person.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Second
Great. Thank you.
question. The second
Great.
question was about what advice to give to new to a new people or culture person. I think the best advice is really recognize and appreciate your folks, your people, your team. When you give someone the feeling that you really want them around you, you really care about them, you really want to do what's best in for them and to really look out for them, that starts to resonate inside people, and people now want to give their best in return. Because I think too many times we forget about that. We forget about that little organ in our body called our heart, and we have to remember to lead from the heart. And even though the brain is higher than the heart in terms of height, we can't always make every decision because it's based on logic or it's based on a specific cerebral view. We have to make decisions that lead from the heart. And what can I say to someone who is just new or I'm new to an organization? And how can I feel like we are close and we are working together? And that's probably the best advice out there, is that that's how culture grows. That's how culture thrives. When people feel alienated or questionable, like, what do I do? What does this person do? Who is this person? I don't even know their name. That's a problem. One real quick example, Jamad. I remember back in my years in restaurant operations, I had managers on my team that did not know the last name of the employee. So when paycheck day came around, this is before direct deposit, they would be going through all the checks trying to say, and your last name is, and I overheard that once and I didn't really like that. So I
Yeah.
approached that individual privately and I said, this individual's worked here for 5 years and you probably worked endless shifts with this individual and you only know them by their first name. You never bothered to know their last name and moreover, more about them, like, about their family and about any, whatever they do as hobbies. And that person really took that to heart and said, you know what, I'm going to change that, and they did. And of course from then on, that individual was really very much aligned with their employees. And that type of alignment again occurs with something as simple as knowing the person's last name and knowing a little bit about them.
Wow. Thank you so much, Amir. That so much to be said to that. When I go in and we're doing interviews, when our team comes in, we do interviews with people and we ask specific questions around connection, excuse me, or value. It's exactly what you just mentioned. People say the fact that this leader remembered my name, or they remembered this small thing that I happened to share with them. And when I saw them the next time, they said, "Hey, how was your grandson's birthday party?"
There you go.
Right?
There you
Like
go.
those are the things that it just that connects with me so much because it is often those small things that make people know that they're valued, that they belong in this space, that they're cared for. So I love that, that the advice, building connection and taking the time. And I think that that's so important. I know we're closing out here, but I'll just say this. I think if there's one thing I'm taking away from this conversation today, and there's so many things I'm taking away from this conversation today, but one of the things that I'm taking away from it is, as we talked about headwinds and everything moving so fast all the time, what I've learned so much from this conversation and appreciate is taking the time to truly build connection and build culture, because the return on that, right, is just, you can't even count it. It will serve you well. And I think in today's world, leaders get pushed and forced into this really fast paced culture. Move, 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 move. We got to figure this out. Got to do this. Got to do that. You know what I mean? And so much can be directed towards this outcome or the bottom line, and sometimes it's easy for a leader to leapfrog over building that connection. And when you build that connection again, I think it just serves well. So as you were answering that question, it kind of brought me back to something that you mentioned earlier. What does it mean for someone to come to work happy and leave happier? And I think you just answered it with that last question. It's them being connected to the people who they work with. It's knowing that they're valued, and that those are cultural things. So, Amir, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing. I foresee a part two or part three to this, because there's several other things I took notes on. You talked about mindset. I'm like, we got to dive into mindset next time, and just some other things that you mentioned. But thank you again for sharing
My
your
pleasure.
expertise. And I'm going to say this to you. Thank you. I'm happy to know that you are in leadership
I
and
appreciate
that
that.
you are
Appreciate that.
leading from that place. So thank you for what you
Very
do.
thoughtful of you. Thank you so much.
Yes. And I will definitely be checking out Norms when I'm in Vegas.
Please, please. And
All
make sure
right.
you have a big appetite because their food is delicious. You're going to want to keep eating it.
Well, I will. And I'm going in there as a guest, right? So,
Perfect.
well, thank you again, Amir. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. And again, I guarantee if Amir is open to it, we'll definitely have Amir back for some
Love to.
future
My
conversations.
pleasure.